Welcome to Living the Smarter Science of Slim, where we provide a scientifically proven lifestyle for long-term health and fat loss by eating more and exercising less, but smarter.
Eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. I am so ready for that.
Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back with another bonus Smarter Science of Slim podcast. Today's show is going to be a lovely one full of smiles and inspiration and just good information because we have a woman who was dubbed an apostle for fitness by the Wall Street Journal. She's the author of the book From Fat to Fit, Turn Yourself into a Weapon of Mass Reduction. And her story, which I'll let her tell in a bit more detail, is basically just before turning 60, she decided to reinvent herself. And in fact, she chronicled, in her words, her transformation from Butterball to Butterfly in weekly newspaper articles, and then got our whole community so pumped up about what she was doing that more than 1,000 ordinary people teamed up to lose nearly 4 tons of fat in 2 months. She's gone on to write the Fat to Fit Meltdown Manual so that other people can do in their community what she has so profoundly done. You can learn more about her on the website From Fat to Fit, and that's the number 2.com. Carole Carson, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Carole, we got to start from the very beginning. Tell us how you went from, in your words, and your motivation to go from Butterball to Butterfly.
My beginning was not auspicious. In fact, it began, I'm standing naked on the scale. I got out of the shower in the morning, weighed myself. I didn't even put on underwear because I didn't want to add. And I stepped on the scale and it broke. And I thought it was a message from on high. I think I looked up the ceiling and I said, "Oh, are you trying to tell me something here?" So in that moment, I thought, I need to do something. And I went out and bought a new scale that day. And the problem is with new scales is they're more accurate. So I actually weighed more than I knew. It went up 5 pounds. So I'm now coming in at 183 pounds. And I'm only 5'2", not even that, 5'1" now. So that's way, way, way too much. So I decided that I would get fit. And that's important because I didn't decide to lose weight. I decided to get fit. And I'd been dieting for 40 years without success. In fact, I joked that I was an expert on what not to do. So this time I thought, well, what mistakes have I made? What can I learn from my failed efforts? And from that, I derived my own simple little formula for FIT, F-I-T. I'd make it fun. I would find exercise I love to do, and I would find foods that I love to eat that would pack on pounds. I would stand for individualized. I think at the time I'd fallen and I had a torn hamstring. So exercise, I had to be really careful that I didn't set myself back. And also my age at 60, I couldn't do things I could when I was your age, Jonathan. And lastly, I would team up with others. I would do it together. And I used those 3 concepts throughout then the remainder of my weight loss. And I'd always wanted to write, so I offered to write a single article for the newspaper. And instead of it being a single article that they were going to bury in the back of the newspaper in the senior section, they put the article on the front page of the paper with my measurements and photo, and said I was going to demonstrate to the community how this could be done.
Oh, wow. Well, they threw your backpack over the wall there.
Well, the day the newspaper came out, a neighbor called and said, "Go look at the newspaper." Well, I went and got the newspaper and read it. And I am absolutely mortified because I had not even told my husband my weight. And there it is on the front page of the local newspaper. And my husband came down to breakfast, and first thing I said to him was, "We have to move."
Oh, no.
And then I went to town that day, and everybody said, "Well, Carole, if you could do it, maybe I could do it." And, of course, people recognized me everywhere I went. It's a small community. I live in Northern California. And I came home that night, and I thought, well, maybe I could do it. And then, of course, I'm sorry, Jonathan, but I think men process things differently than women. They're kind of slower on sometimes. So at dinner, my husband says, "Well, have you thought about where you want to move?" And I said, no, we can't move. I have to write this newspaper series. And that's how it all began.
Well, and then so the series started, and what were your key observations? Obviously, you got the community really inspired. 2 tons of fat loss is no small feat. So what was different about your experience that caused that massive inspiration?
Well, I shared the ups and downs, the setbacks, the triumphs, and when I had lost 60 pounds, I continued writing, and only I expanded I continue to write about my own experience, but I added profiles of other people who were either doing what I was doing or had maintained a fit lifestyle for years. And I used all different examples, like a kid who was playing wheelchair tennis, and or a 75-year-old who had black martial belts. So I tried to get a range of people and the different ways that they had maintained their fitness. And I also started writing about opportunities in our community to get fit, whether it was a hike or a gym or an event. And after I had done that for about a year, I said, anybody want to join me in this getting fit business? And we expected perhaps, because it was winter, and we have snow here where I live, and also we have a lot of seniors who don't like to come out at night, and we have young families who have to put their kids to bed after they do their homework. We expected maybe, I don't know, 2 dozen people. Well, after we had barricaded ourselves in because the fire marshal said we couldn't take any more people into our theater, we probably had 1,200 people show up, if not more. And we continued to grow each week. We formed teams, and we ended up losing that 2 tons in 4 weeks. But, what I'm even prouder of as an achievement is the fact that communities across the United States picked up on this idea. And I stopped keeping track, but when I stopped keeping track, I think over 1,200 communities had organized their own fitness and weight loss events.
And
we really triggered. It was an imaginative idea, I think, and we really triggered or we pioneered this trend.
And what were some of the key differences, Carole? You mentioned you had been trying for 40 years to do this, and not only in this instance were you successful, but clearly some of the techniques you were using helped others to be successful as well. So what had you done, and then what is the, for lack of better terms, counterpoint that you are doing now and helping others to do?
Well, I think I had always before viewed weight loss as a grim process involving deprivation. And instead I flipped that and I made it a fun adventure. Like, I'm going to find new foods to eat. In terms of exercise, I tried every exercise you can think of, from cycling to kickboxing to weightlifting to yoga, Pilates. I mean, I made it an adventure, and that shifted the whole experience from grimness to, wow, this is really fun to open up myself to these new possibilities. I jazzercise too, which I'm terrible at. And in the end, I ended up with 3 forms of exercise that I could sustain for the rest of my life. I think that was another key element, which is when I said I had to individualize my program, which is I determined that I needed a way to live, a way to eat, and a way to exercise that I could sustain forever. This wasn't just a quick fix. This is a way I had to live from this point forward. But I think the biggest mistake I had made in the past is that I'd always tried to do it alone. I thought if I had enough willpower and, jacked up my incentive, I could pull it off on my own. And the truth is, I couldn't. I needed help. I needed a trainer to help me learn how to exercise so I didn't damage my hamstring again. I needed the support of my husband. I needed my doctor to reduce my medications. I mean, it took a whole little village supporting me to help me make the changes I needed to make. And that's why when I finished this, I thought, I need to help communities do this. It's just too hard to do alone.
Well, Carole, it sounds like you took, if I understand correctly, first of all, you really took ownership for this. You weren't looking for someone else to say, like, Carole, you have to do this. This is the one right approach and do this. You said, no, I'm going to try it all and I'm going to see what works for Carole Carson, what works for me. And then, because also only you can determine this, what can you keep up? What can you sustain? And then once you found that individualized formula, what works for you and that which you derive enjoyment from, you found at least one buddy to do it with you, because otherwise it's lonely.
It's lonely, and you lose your willpower. I mean, there are days that you may not feel like exercising, but for instance, I love tennis. So if I have a date with 3 other people to play tennis, no way I'm not going to show up. But if I had a solo exercise activity for myself, I might not show up. I might disappoint myself. So, and also I think I'm a really shallow person, or maybe I've reached a stage in my life where I just want everything to be fun. And if it's grim and awful, it's like, I don't do it.
And Carole, have you found in your thousands and thousands of people whose lives you've touched with this message of fun, individualized, and team-based health, certainly getting support, have you found, obviously there are ways to do that, you have a friend or you go out with people physically, but I know for some people either that are just a little bit more solo or just live in areas where they may not have access to a huge amount of people that are on the same schedule as them. Have you found ways maybe to digitally get support? Or if you're like me and all you do is work and you don't have any friends, how do you get support digitally, or what are some alternatives?
Oh, there's dozens of apps that are out there right now. There's online communities. When I said I support community weight loss, I mean, communities come in different forms. There's affinity groups. For instance, some people belong to churches, and churches are organizing their own little fitness groups. But there's online communities that are just fabulous for providing support, including Weight Watchers, Spark People. I mean, there are dozens of online communities. And then also employers now are organizing fitness programs. So if there isn't one where someone works, they can talk to their human resources and get one started, because employers have an interest in helping their employees stay fit. But the other thing is, I think it's good to have a combination. For instance, I do a floor routine that takes about 45 minutes a day that I do by myself. And I use it as kind of a meditation time when I allow ideas to surface that otherwise might not surface in the busyness of life. But I also wear a pedometer. I think pedometers are fabulous for keeping people moving, because it becomes a goal to make sure that you get 10,000 steps every day. So there are all sorts of tools, communities, apps, resources for people that are technologically savvy and for people who aren't.
And Carole, what would you say, given you mentioned you started this transformation in your 60th year on this earth, and certainly there are many, 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 many people in our country that are in that same life stage. What have you found to be the most unique considerations, or things that are even uniquely helpful for you and for people like you?
Well, I think when I began this, my main motivation was vanity. I mean, I didn't like the way I looked, and I just. And it's funny that I didn't want anybody to know my weight, because, I mean, all they had to do was look at me, right? I mean, you can't really hide it. But what surprised me, shortly after I began my makeover, I got a call from our local hospital, and they brought me in and said they wanted to do a health and risk assessment on me at the beginning and then later after I'd lost the weight. Well, when they brought me in and tested me, what I learned was that I was in the 90th percentile for risk of cancer, heart disease, stroke. And that was because of my family history, my own history, my habits, all sorts of factors combined. I had no idea I was walking around with a gun to my head. If I had not made those changes, I wouldn't be alive today. I think after 4 months, only 4 months, they retested me. Now I was in the normal range in all those categories. I had no idea that the body could be so forgiving and that we could reduce our medical risks by making these changes. I think I approached it as a vanity issue.
And did you find that when you had that, maybe let's call it a more deeper meaning, did that fuel you even more?
Well, I think what it did is it I had the impulse then to share what I had learned with other people, because I can look around and I see other people walking around with a gun to their head. And I want to say, people, you got a gun to your head. Do you know that? And you don't have to live like this. I mean, you can reduce your risk. And, it's really expensive to take a lot of medications every day. I mean, I have pretty much eliminated the medications that the doctors had me on. It's in addition to maybe dying prematurely, I was going to have a lot less money because I was going to be spending money on medications, and I was going to be hospitalized a lot more.
Well, certainly seems like continuing life is more motivational than just making the scale happy. So not dying is certainly a strong form of motivation, it sounds like.
And also, though, I think having the energy to do what I want to do, having the physical ability to do whatever I want to do. I mean, I frequently play an hour and a half of tough tennis. I mean, really tough competitive tennis, and then go for a 3-mile walk. Now I'm in my early 70s. I probably have more energy than a lot of more sedentary people that are in their 20s.
I think that's so wonderful, Carole, because I noticed that, I mean, when we get, like when you're in the stage of life that I'm in, you're just kind of working. That's all you're doing. But once you get through that stage of life, you have so much time you could spend doing all of this wonderful stuff. And how amazing is it to have the level of health and vitality that you're now enjoying, to be able to take the 40 years that sometimes people may perceive in one way and actually transform those 40 years into a time of vibrancy and celebration and enjoyment.
And I have a need to give back to other communities. I mean, I work with communities mainly in the United States, sometimes out of the country, as an advisor to help them organize their own events. Because, the problem with obesity continues to excuse the pun, expand. And the medical costs associated with the illnesses and medical conditions that occur as a result of obesity continue to grow. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done at the community level. I can't, there isn't enough for me to go around to counsel individuals. So I focus my energy on helping whole communities to tackle the issue together.
And Carole, from my understanding, your focus is, from a community perspective, at least in large part, is getting people moving, getting people to be more active, getting people to exercise, which of course is a wonderful, wonderful component. How have you found successful approaches where communities can support each other nutritionally?
Well, I mean, exercise is wonderful for our bodies, but changes in weight occur through changes in eating, as you know from writing your book and doing all your research. And part of, I mean, and of course, when you go start messing around or recommending, I don't recommend any specific diet, incidentally, but I do recommend eating healthfully and taking into account the person's preferences, maybe cultural background, maybe religious considerations about what they do eat and what they don't eat. But it's really important to eat healthfully. And I just saw a headline in the news this morning that the United States allows additives and chemicals in our food that are not allowed in China, Europe, and the U.S. So people have to become a lot pickier about the food that they put in their mouth. You could probably speak to this too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I love the point you made about if we want to be able to move throughout our life, it's a good idea to move throughout our life. Like exercise is baseline. You have to do it if you want to maintain your body's ability to move. There's no better way to do that than to move. So we've got to do that. But so often it seems, Carole, that people may even stop exercising because their motivation for exercise are those body composition changes, which they don't see, or they see the opposite of because they exercise, it makes them hungry, and then they just eat more of the foods which are causing their suboptimal body composition. So how do you, because you get these thousands of people together and it's fun. We're together. We're in a class and we're all active and our endorphins are going because we're moving. We're outside and that's all good. And then it's Sunday night and we're at home and we're by ourselves and we're hungry. How do we tap into the community or leverage techniques to ensure that we don't go off the ranch in those nutrition circumstances?
Well, once a community you can view the 8-week programs that I typically do with community as sort of an awareness session, a consciousness raising session. And then after that, the real work begins where you start institutionalizing the changes the community needs to make. For instance, in our community, we have so many farmers markets where people can buy fresh. They can buy organic if they like, but they definitely can buy locally grown produce at prices that are less than at the grocery store. Our schools now have more exercise and programs for kids, and we're moving towards doing real food in our schools as opposed to processed food that we were serving before. The hospital has changed its cafeteria so that the food that it's serving both its visitors and its patients is healthier. So these are the kinds of institutional changes that are gradual and begin to occur over time. Now, in our community, when we did the meltdown, the number of children at risk for obesity was right about at the national average, 33, 34%. And we did a retrospective a couple of years ago at the request of a magazine. They wanted to see if the changes in our community were permanent or just a 8-week, oh, this was a lot of fun, now let's go back to the way we were. As it turned out, what we learned, which I didn't even know until we did the retrospective, was that our rate of children at risk for obesity has dropped to 18%. So that tells me that families got involved and changed their lifestyle at home. We changed things at the school. We changed, we added walking trails so kids could walk safely to and from school. Farmers markets were added. So all of these changes combined contributed to that shift in statistic.
Carole, if an individual is living a healthier lifestyle, they're eating smarter, they're moving more, they're doing some smarter exercise, they're out there, they're making a difference in their own life. What have you found to be the most effective ways that they can help others? Because oftentimes, sometimes individuals who are healthy, quote unquote, there's this stigma that they're trying to recruit people or people almost get intimidated by them. Like, well, if you have success, it's going to make me feel bad about myself. So therefore, I'm going to be like, oh, well, you think you're too good to eat this cupcake or something along those lines.
Yeah.
So how do
then I'm going to have two.
Exactly. So how do we not only not turn people off? That's step one, is like, don't turn people off. But what you've shown is we can actually turn people on to this lifestyle. So what are the key ways we can approach it to turn people on rather than off?
Well, first and foremost is to be an example, a positive example. I mean, I have so much fun with my life. I think sometimes people are going to say, well, I want to have as much fun as she's having. So I think if you're an example of someone who's living and loving your life, it's like whatever, it's like that movie, whatever she's having, I want some of that. Because I say that because I noticed once I lost weight that people around me started losing weight, and I was not proselytizing. I mean, a stepson lost about 40 pounds. My son lost about 20 pounds. My husband started working on getting more fit. Actually, my husband gained weight at first because he kept wanting to eat the way he did before. So I would fix 2 dinners, sort of my new food way of eating. And then he still got to eat his old traditional food. And so he ate both dinners. And then eventually he said, your skinny food isn't so bad. So he joined me. But he's still working on his fitness and losing weight. But I never lectured him. I never said a word to him. All I said is, this is the life I want for myself. This is how I want to take care of my body. But I think the being a role model is important. And then the other thing is educating. You've done a brilliant job with your book on pulling together all of the latest research and turning it into a workable program for individuals. But to the extent that you can keep educating yourself and educating the people around you about what the issues are. I mean, nobody wants to put food in their bodies that's going to poison them. So, people have a self-interest in learning about what's going into their food. So you work on, I mean, to me, I spend a lot of time still writing articles because I think education makes the difference.
Carole, I love so much the point you made about have fun. I'm so deep into the science that sometimes I forget about this, but it reminded me that I just on the outside looking in, there are certain lifestyles which when you see someone says, I do X, and they seem sad or tired, or it seems like they're doing X and it's hard and it's I mean, why in God's name would you ever want to? I mean, that's okay. Yeah, it's healthy. It seems to be really making you feel good. So that is such a profound. I mean, it's simple and it's seemingly common sense, but often common sense isn't common practice. Where if the approach you're taking is enjoyable, one, you're probably on the right track. 'Cause if it's not enjoyable, you're in that deprivation, non-sustainable mindset. And if it is effective and it is making you feel and look vibrant, it's almost impossible not to inspire others, because we're all just motivated. We all want to feel better. So if Tom and Mary are doing this thing that's really making them feel better, that speaks many more volumes than trying to lecture someone and say, do what I'm doing. Because if what you were doing was so effective, you wouldn't even need to tell them. They would see it and just say, hey, what are you doing?
Yeah, who you are speaks more than anything you could say. I think this power of example, I have a really dear friend who does the video editing for my video productions. And it's a sedentary job, right? Editing video, long hours, putting things together. He's probably 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight. And he's always making fun of me because I'm walking over to his place or I'm off to do something. And it's good-natured kidding. But and he's having joint problems. He's pre-diabetic, and I even got him a pedometer and said, why don't you just keep track and get up out of your chair and do a little walking during the day. But nothing I said or did. He's even editing these fitness videos, for heaven's sakes, So I gave up and just enjoy him as a friend. Well, guess what? He totally surprised me the other day. He's joined a gym, and he's going to an exercise class, and I'm so thrilled for him. So you see, we do have an impact even when we don't know we're having one.
Carole, that is absolutely true. I tell a story which often makes people smile, and that's I drink these green shakes because I'm usually on the go, and it's hard for me to sit down and eat 2 pounds of vegetables. Just the amount of chewing doesn't fit in the schedule, so I blend up these smoothies, and I always bring them into work, and people are like, oh, what's this green drink you're drinking? What is this green drink? Your silly green drink. And then after about 4 to 6 weeks, I open the refrigerator, and I'm like, wait a second. That's not my green drink. What are all these green drinks doing in here? And you're just like, well, that's kind of cool.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And again, now that wouldn't have been the case if I would have gone to people's desk and be like, why aren't you drinking this green drink? Drink this green drink. But if you're just drinking green drinks and people are like, wow, that person seems pretty happy and healthy.
They got energy.
Yeah. I love it. I love that much. It's just about having fun. Obviously, we want to have that fun backed by science, but have some fun. And Carole, what's next for you? You're doing all kinds of stuff all over the world. What's next?
Well, I'm doing a series of videos, Fit is Fun, where we tackle different topics all the way from diabetes, breast cancer, how to get started, how to stay on track, and where I interview experts, and then we have individuals tell stories that demonstrate the points. And I'm continuing to write articles. Your listeners can find my articles on AARP's website. That's a tremendous platform that they give me to promote my articles. And of course, I want to continue consulting with communities and helping them launch their weight loss events and fitness events, whether it's an employer or an affinity group or an online community, because I do believe the future of if we're going to make the changes that we need to make as a society, it's going to have to be done at the community level.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we'll keep pumping out the science as long as you keep pumping out the inspiration, okay?
All right. And Jonathan, I had one question for you.
Sure.
The Medical Society just came out and said that obesity has now been categorized as qualifies or is included in the medical definition of illness,
mm-hmm.
or medical condition. What do you think about that? Should obesity have been medicalized a long time ago, or is that a mistake? I mean, one of the consequences probably is that we'll have more weight loss drugs available to people to help them lose weight.
I'm going to give you a science answer, if that's okay.
Great. That's why I ask it.
So the underlying my work, and we talk about the homeostatic regulation of weight. We talk about how it's not just a matter of conscious regulation of calories. How could it be? We don't consciously regulate our insulin levels. We don't consciously regulate our blood sugar levels. We don't consciously regulate our blood pressure levels. So why is it that this one system works that way? Well, it doesn't. And certainly there's important lifestyle factors that can contribute to obesity. But there are also lifestyle factors that can contribute to diabetes. And in fact, those lifestyle factors are often very similar. The same types of foods that can cause the homeostatic system around blood sugar regulation and insulin production to break down, which we call the disease diabetes, aka the breakdown of the system's inability to maintain health automatically, we define as a disease, and we call that disease diabetes. Now, obesity is, if you look under the covers and you look at the breakdown of the hypothalamus's ability to be sensitive to certain hormones and to regulate body composition, if you look at the changes in gut bacteria, there are these indicators which are as clear-cut and are as common in obese individuals as we would say there are underlying factors in diabetic individuals. So when you look at how similar the underlying metabolic dysfunction is for, say, hypertension or for diabetes and for obesity, if we're going to define the first two as a disease, it would seem odd not to define the third as a disease. And again, this is not a moral argument. This is nothing. This is just saying if we look at the characteristics of a body that is diabetic, if we look at the characteristics of a body that has hypertension, and then we look at the characteristics of a body that is overweight, the same reasons we call hypertension and diabetes diseases seem to apply to obesity as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I agree with everything you've said. I've wondered if there's a downside if people will somehow transfer then the issue of their obesity or weight loss to a physician and look for a weight loss drug to solve the problem. The same way we give people with diabetes insulin.
And I think that is a more global problem. Like I don't think the correct approach to overcoming the diabetes epidemic is not to prescribe more insulin, right? Like that's like putting, as Dr. Peter Attia said in his recent TED Talk, that's like putting cover up on top of bruises. Like what we need to do is stop slamming our shins against coffee tables. That's the solution. And whether or not we call bruising a disease or not, I think we all know that taking pills, or at least we should know, or people like you and I should make it our mission, that taking pills is most often not the right approach, because a shortage of pills was not the cause of your problem. Like we have to identify the cause of the problem. The cause of all of these lifestyle problems are lifestyle decisions, eating improper foods, not moving enough. So whether or not we call it a disease or not, I think it's on our shoulders as influencers to say, call it a disease, don't call it a disease. To the extent that we don't eat healthy food, and we're understanding more and more and more what healthy food is, that to the extent that we don't eat so much healthy food that we're too full for unhealthy food, and to the extent that we don't move, we're going to have a bunch of conditions. And if you want to call some of them diseases and not others, or all of them diseases, they all are terrible and they all make you suffer. So to me, I think people like to get amped up about certain things. To me, I don't get as amped up about this one because from a scientific perspective, I do think it's fair to call it a disease. If people want to use that as a way to say, well, clearly the solution is taking pills, well, that's just indicative of a deeper problem where the solution to diabetes is not to inject yourself with insulin. The solution to diabetes is to live a lifestyle that does not cause the underlying system to break down.
So whether it's a disease or not, it'll always require a person taking ownership for making the changes that would promote health.
Exactly. And to me, it actually becomes a very esoteric semantic discussion of just like literally like what is the dictionary definition of disease? If the dictionary definition of disease is, I actually don't know what it is. We could look it up right now. But if it was something like a systemic dysfunction in the body that tends to manifest a series of predictable symptoms, well, then, yes, obesity is, I mean, you can look at anyone who's obese and they have similar characteristics in gut bacteria that non-obese people have. They have similar level of hormonal dysregulation that non-overweight people don't have. They have different levels of inflammation in their brain. So it's this, like, if we could manufacture that state in any person's body, their body would store more and burn less. So
you're good, Jonathan. I thought you were actually reading from the dictionary.
Oh, no. Did you actually pull up the dictionary definition?
No. I'm just saying you sounded like you were reading from the dictionary. I believed you.
Oh, no. I wasn't. So again, I keep a couple folks have asked me questions about this, and my urge to everyone is actually just I would pretend this really never happened. I mean, hormonal dysregulation has been talked about like a disease, or metabolic dysregulation in the neurobiological and endocrinological communities for decades. Like it was just like, oh yeah, of course, that's what it is. The fact that it's just now coming into the mainstream, again, eat smarter, exercise smarter, live better. That's the bottom line.
That is the bottom line.
So I forgot this is Carole's interview, not mine.
How clever of me to shift it to you.
Well, Carole, thank you for all that you do to help people, whether we want to call it a disease or not, to make the lifestyle changes, which are not deprivation. They are actually quite enjoyable. And in fact, if they're not enjoyable, my key takeaway from this talk is we're probably not taking the right steps. They've got to be enjoyable.
That's right. And thank you for your partnership. You know, a lot of us, you and me, a lot of other people are working in partnership, whether we have an official relationship or not, to encourage individuals to make the changes they need so they can live longer, live healthier, spend less money on drugs, and enjoy whatever time they have left.
And I really appreciate, Carole, also your approach, which is one that is very clearly not driven by it's driven by love and enjoyment and almost a humanitarian effort. Because truly, again, like this disease discussion is a distraction. People are dying. So I don't care if you call it a disease or not. Like it correlates with death. It correlates with sadness. And anything we can do to minimize the amount of death and sadness in the world, I sure think is important.
I do too.
Well, folks, her name is Carole Carson. Obviously, she is a wonderful inspiration, a wonderful beam of light, and certainly lives up to the term butterfly versus butterball. And you can learn more about her at her website, fromfat2fit.com, and that is the number 2, so FROMFAT 2. FIT.com. She also has a wonderful book called From Fat to Fit. And if you want to be an example like her in your community, she actually has a manual to help you do that. And that's Fat to Fit Meltdown Manual. Carole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for a wonderful discussion.
Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. And please remember this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and live better. Talk with you soon.
Wait, don't stop listening yet. If you like the podcast and if there's other ways we can help you, please join us in the Smarter Science of Slim support group, which is freely available at the Smarter Science of Slim website, smarterscienceofslim.com. There you'll find all kinds of free recipes and success stories and just all kinds of fun stuff, like how to help your kids go sane and just great community content.
And just one last thing before you go, if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes and up onto Amazon.com and leaving us a review, and then going over to Facebook and liking us, we would hugely appreciate it.